we are going to look at a short story, Tati the She-Wolf, written by the author, Barbara Walker. So first we'll look at a little bit about the author. Who is Barbara Walker? Barbara Walker is an American author and feminist. She has authored several volumes of remarkably comprehensive knitting references. She has also written extensively about religion, mythology, occult, and spirituality. Although she has written about all these topics, religion, mythology, stuff like that, she also criticizes mainstream religion and how it has contributed to patriarchal and sexist social structures. However, she argues for the revival of the goddess image in feminist context. So she brings in the image of the mother goddess. So the image of the mother goddess, for instance, appears very often in her work as a powerful metaphor for feminist revival, which is both critically appreciated as well as criticized. So the Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, Woman's Dictionary of Symbols and Sacred Objects, Restoring the Goddess. These are a few books that she has written about, but 10 references. So the current story, The She-Wolf, is taken from her book called Feminist Fairy Tales, which is a collection of stories in which she reinvents popular fairy tales, frameworks, and myths. Now, so let's look at the plot of the story. It's happening in the story. It is a simple story, but goes like this. So it tells a story. She will tell a story of Lupa, a young girl who lives with her widowed father, right? So they have only one source of food, which is a cow that they have. So one day the cow takes a pill and dies after a few days, after which they have possibly no source of food or income, right? So they have a little bit of land, but nothing really comes from the land. And after the cow dies, they preserve the meat for a few days and sustain themselves. But after those days, they absolutely have nothing. So Lupa's mother, her deceased mother, was a fine artist. So her father is left with no other choice than sell the tapestries woven by her deceased mother in hope of getting some money to feed themselves. However, so Lupa takes the tapestries and she's on her way to the market to sell these tapestries. But on the way to the market, a heavy rainstorm occurs, and after the rainstorm, she finds out that all the tapestries are actually ruined. So after finding out the tapestries are ruined, Lupa loses all her hope, right? Because now there is no hope of getting some money. In addition to that, all this handiwork of her mother is also lost. But however, she continues on her way to the market, thinking that she can get at least a little bit of money to get some food. But on her way, she hears a cry for help from the forest. She finds a she-wolf caught in a trap by her right foreleg, wounded and howling in pain. So she finds the wolf and she frees the wolf, and she nurses the wound of the wolf. To Lupa's surprise, she finds that the wolf can actually talk. So they have a talk, and Lupa tells a story, her story to the wolf and all the tragedy that happened. And the wolf says that everything will be fine. She promises that you don't worry, you go home, you don't go to the market, everything will be fine. For some reason, Lupa also thinks that, believes the wolf, and she goes back home. But she says nothing to her father about this encounter with the wolf or about. So she just says that she did not get any money for the tapestries, and she gets money. So that night, both of them, the man and her father, sleep hungry and very tired. They have absolutely no food at all. But the next morning, what happens? They find a haunch of fresh venison, which is deer meat, on their doorstep. Lupa and her father enjoy a delicious meal. Unfortunately, the next day the king's guardsmen come searching for them, accusing them of poaching and arrest them. So arrest them. They're taken to the king's court for trial. Although Lupa's father tries to explain what happens, he realizes that the story sounds very unbelievable, right? When you say it out loud, it is quite unbelievable. But the queen, who was present in the court, she takes an interest in the matter. She was present there with their two infant daughters. She is intrigued by this whole situation and she decides that she will spare their lives. So she tells the king that don't give them, I will talk to them, I will take them as mine, do not punish them. So then both of them are taken to the queen's quarters where Lupa is thanking the queen for saving their lives. But here the queen reveals herself as the she-wolf that Lupa helped to escape. So she is indebted to Lupa and she reiterates the fact that how indebted she is to Lupa for her life. So the queen offers both Lupa and her father a livelihood in the castle, right? So Lupa becomes the queen's handmaid and her father becomes the groundskeeper. In the castle, Lupa is able to retrieve the ruined tapestries and restore them. Their exquisite patterns are copied and later become famous as lupine tapestries. So Barbara Walker ends the story like this. People said that sometimes on moonless nights, Lupa and her father both underwent a strange transformation and ran through the forest with wild wolves in a pack that was always led by a large grey female with yellow eyes and a scarred head. So that's how the story ends. So let's analyze the story. So on the face of it, it's a very simple story. It's just telling a very simple story of a bird and a father and how they are kind of saved out of their misery, right? So, but when you look at the story closely, so several parallels from the story suggest that it is a reworking of the popular fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood. So you know how Little Red Riding Hood goes. The girl who was on her way to her grandmother's house. So she was instructed by her mother not to talk to anybody or not to stray from her path on the way, but that she meets the wolf, this very manipulative wolf who talks her, tricks her, and gets to the grandma's place. By the time Little Red Riding Hood reaches her grandma's place, the wolf is there dressed as her grandmother, and the wolf in the end eats both the grandmother and the girl, Little Red Riding Hood. That is the story. And then at the end, a soldier, somebody comes to help to cut the wolf's stomach open, and both of them are saved. That is how the story goes. So when you look at this, there are parallels between this popular fairy tale and our story, The She-Wolf, right? But you can see that Hawker's story suffers the image of the big bad wolf, with which we are all familiar, right? So the wolf is a villain in fairy tales. So the big bad wolf who was out there to get innocent, unsuspecting people or young girls. So this big bad wolf that has become a staple of fairy tales and folklore over time is kind of rewritten in Barbara Walker's story. Walker begins the story by giving a brief description of wolf worship that existed in pagan communities and how Christianity demonized wolves by medieval. With the rise of the idea of lycanthropy or werewolfism, fairy tales gradually adopted wolves as villains. So of Lupa and her father, right? So you see how the progression of wolf worship in pagan communities to how they have evolved as a villainous creature in our fairy tales, which we are familiar with. So if you go back, you can see that even in the case of Roman mythology, right? So there is this image of the wolf mother, a wolf, a she wolf, who actually took care of Remus and Romulus, who actually founded the twin brothers who founded Rome. So they were suckled and taken care of by a she wolf initially as children, as infants. So you see that this idea of wolf as a big bad creature comes very late. It's not there everywhere. So you have the idea of wolf worship and wolf mimicking communities, especially in pagan communities. So that is what Barbara Walker begins her story. So you know that it is a deliberate attempt uh, to to subvert the stereotypical narrative where wolves are villains, right? So the she-wolf, however, goes beyond this traditional approach and presents a she-wolf who is kind and grateful. The scary wolf that eats grandma and Riding Hood is absent here. Story challenges the simplistic and conventional stereotypes that are generally part of the fairy tale world. The patronizing figure of the Prince Charming and the damsel in distress who waits to be saved by the prince are absent and cheated. So it's not only a wolf image that the story has rewritten, right? So usually what is the typical framework or the typical format of a fairy tale? So there is a Prince Charming who comes to save the damsel in distress, who's absolutely who's completely helpless and can't save herself. So Prince Charming enters and saves this poor girl, right? So those tropes are entirely absent from the story. Instead, Lupa's distress is resolved by another female figure, the queen or the she-wolf herself. Such an offer of help itself follows from the queen's indebtedness to Lupa after her kind and compassionate treatment towards the wolf, rather than a patronizing impulse. Lupa's agency here is not completely eclipsed by an all-powerful savior. So what happens here is that Queen saves Lupa, but this kind of saving itself is not, it does not come out of a patronizing impulse. Rather, it comes as a favor or out of the queen's indebtedness because Lupa helped save her life, right? So there is a mutual helping here. So it's a sort of balance rather than in the case of this patriarchal imbalance that we see in other usual fairy tales. But, however, although the story rewrites some stereotypical representation, it retains some others. While the patriarchal lopsidedness of the dynamics between the girl and the savior prince is removed, the hierarchy of social class is reinforced in the story. So we can only wonder whether being a handmaid to the queen was a happy ending that Lupa deserved or not. Though the Prince Charming does not appear to marry the girl, the story nonetheless moves towards a happily ever after ending, although it's of a different nature. The talking wolf and the magical elements firmly tie the story to its fairy tale framework. So the story does not move away from a fairy tale framework. It sort of reinforces the fairy tale framework with so many of these magical elements. But what happens here is that some of the stereotypes are rewritten, whereas some of them are retained. So you can also see this whole mother goddess image here, the queen mother, the wolf mother who is taking care of the pack, who's all powerful here, who has the power. So the change comes in the fact that who